Hello, hello, hello again. Welcome to day 2, and thank you for coming back. It's always very reassuring when people do come back for day 2. Talking of day 2, it's not really relevant to day 2 at all. If you want to save the dates for next year, it will be the 8th and 9th of September. We just decided this morning. Oh, look, I'm getting applause from the front row. Whoop, whoop. Yeah. So just a couple of quick things for today, just in case anybody wasn't here yesterday, just to remind for people doing presentations today, we don't have chairs in the sessions, chair people. We do have chairs to sit on. We don't have chair people chairing the sessions because it's one extra layer of admin and complication, which we can't deal with, and you're all grown-ups. So you need to be responsible for finishing your presentation on time so as not to encroach on the other person, next person, or the break or whatever. If you need help with that, ask someone in the room. Anybody will be happy to help if you want like a 5-minute to go warning or something like that. So sort that out between yourselves. It worked great yesterday. It'll work great today. One thing I forgot to tell you about yesterday, facepalm, in your goodie bags, which you probably haven't got anymore, there is a little one-page form that starts, please, we need your help, with a turquoise highlight. This is about the journal. We are considering with the publisher whether to go for closed peer review in the conventional academic anonymous sense or open peer review where reviewers and authors are known to each other and can interact. There are pros and cons of both, which are set out on that sheet. If you could have a look and give us your views, there's a little box next to the policy press stand, which will be going at lunchtime. So if you could manage that in the morning break or whenever before lunch, and just pop your thoughts. It's anonymous. We're doing this anonymously. You can say whatever. Or if you don't get round to that and you don't mind people knowing what you think, you can email the inquiries at creativeresearchmethods.com. But this is the community that needs to vote on this. We need this community's input on, do we go the anonymous conventional route or do we go the open named route? So please give us your thoughts, your votes, even if you just want to go, just tick which one you like. There is a thing saying, can you explain why? But if you just want to tick one, that's fine too, if you're in a hurry. Paul at Policy Press has to leave at lunchtime today. So if you want to talk to him about a book idea or order some books or nag him for discounts or whatever, get in at the morning break. He will be here for a little bit of the lunch break, but he has to go. It's his daughter's birthday and he needs to get home. He was going to stay for the whole day. And I said, we were talking about yesterday. I was like, no, go home. You need to see your daughter. So, because we're that kind of conference, aren't we? So I think that's enough from me. I'm going to hand you over to Sophie, who's chairing again, with our lovely keynote speaker for today, Su-ming Khoo. Here you go.
Thanks, Helen. So once again, I'm delighted to be introducing another awesome keynote speaker. So Su-ming Khoo is based at the University of Galway in political sciences and sociology. Her research and also her teaching explore different meanings of globalization and development and how these might be contested along north-south lines. She has a very strong research interest in and also commitment to public scholarship, critical higher education studies, higher education for development and global educational ethics. Sue is very international in her approach and collaborations, so I'm sure she'll talk about some of those today. She is an inter and also transdisciplinary scholar with a particular interest in bringing together human rights, developments, and education. Sue is the author of many journal articles, and I'm not going to list all of those. You can all, I'm sure you've read some of them, but you can all look on her webpage. But I just wanted to mention a few books that are super relevant to the conference. So she co-edited with Helen Cara, Researching in the Age of COVID-19, and that is a whopping 3 volumes. The third one in particular I think is really interesting. It's about creativity and ethics, and I've got a feeling Sue might be talking to some of that today. She also co-edited with Helen Cara, Qualitative and Digital Research in Times of Crisis. And I feel super fortunate to be working with Sue as co-editors with Harriet and Helen on the new journal. So now I'm going to hand over to Sue, who will be talking about rehumanizing creativity and ethics.
So thank you, Helen. Thanks everyone for coming and making this conference. Do I need to change the position, John? Oh, fine. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everybody in the room and everybody online. Thank you for coming. And thank you for making this community, being present and bringing like this amazing, positive, curious energy to the room. It's so refreshing, and it's so important, I think, for us all to survive and flourish in these pretty difficult times. So today I'm going to talk about this topic, rehumanizing creativity and ethics. And it's really not a very linear talk, but it's a talk of several starting points that keep coming back in kind of like a cyclical or a circular way. So the first is this theme that I began to explore with Helen with these books on changing or taking time to think about how research might have to change, ought to change, what we need to think. So there's this Researching in Times of Crisis books was bundled in 3 sort of volumes. Each volume is a sort of bundle of ideas, I suppose, response and reassessment. So responding to crises, reassessing what we do in times of crisis, resilience and care. I'm a little bit ambivalent about the word resilience, but bundling it with care brought to the fore why we are interested in resilience. It's not leaving people to cope with whatever it is and hoping it'll turn out right, but it's really about what we need to do to look after each other and ourselves in the situation. And the third then was the most productive and fortunate bundle of ideas, creativity and ethics. And when I kind of thought of these 2 things together, so thank you to all the contributors to volume 3 of Researching in Times of COVID-19, because that kind of started this train of thought of how do these 2 things connect together. So I want to reflect a little on this theme of wings and broken wings and wings that have been forced open and can't close, the fragility and the strength of wings, beauty of wings. And this reflection is set in a time that keeps coming back again. So a difficult time for ethics globally and a difficult time for academia. And it's a time in which we are needing rehumanization because of a feeling, a sense of utter awful dehumanization, because we are normalizing and trying to be hopeful and thinking about how to be good in our research and do really brilliant and excellent and good research in very bad times. So I want to reflect on that and to reflect on those schools of critical theory that came out of dark times, to think about how creativity and ethics can or shouldn't come together. And I want to have a rant against dehumanizing creativity, because a lot of what is said and done to promote creativity is not said and done to promote humanity. And so what can we do about that in our own minds, in our own work, and in our own aspirations, so that our wings don't get broken or clipped? And so that creativity is really what the wings are for: emancipation and freedom. And the 3 main things I want to rant about, dehumanizing things, are individualization, hyper-individualization, because that leads to a world without care. Infocracy. I love this little book by he's a Frankfurt School philosopher, Korean, Byung-Chul Han. Amazing book, right? Infocracy, you get this idea, right? Ugly word, something like being ruled by information instead of information being part of what will make us free and creative. And at the heart of all that, the sort of the rant of all rants, commodification, right? So that everything that we do is for capitalism, for commoditization, to sell, to make money, and not for us. Against a confusing and difficult and challenging reality that we don't know what truth is exactly anymore. And this is the world that we conduct our research in, where it's a world where science has become post-normal, in the words of Fontovitz and Ravitz. Yeah? Post-normal means that there are many values that are in conflict and being contested, that there are very high stakes, and there's a rush and urgency to making decisions, not a good combination for making good choices. So that leads to creativity and indeed our ethical reflections in uncertain conditions, in order to not do the rant things, to not become dehumanized, to resist dehumanization, and to become more inclusive, more humble, and more respectful. And that's what widening peer review is about. So in this call to experiment and think about open reviewing, for example, we want to widen peer review, but that means different kinds of ethical obligations, responsibilities, duties, and work. So just start with the theme of wings. And I've got two works here that help me think about wings. The first is this for Rachel. She wants to see more Asian art by Singaporean artist Andre Wee, a young artist, drawing from a series of drawings called Broken Wings, from some exhibitions across London and elsewhere in 2012-13. And in the artist statement, Andre Wee says that Broken Wings is a series of works that depict wings that build and construct, and ironically, fragment and distort. Despite their seemingly powerful form and structure, these feathered forms reveal their true natures as they begin to fall apart. So the truth being that behind all the facade and feathers, they are all but fragile. So I want to think about fragility and our vulnerability. The other is a very well-known work. I'm sure you all have seen this work before. No? Okay, this funny little drawing was the most treasured possession of the critical theorist Walter Benjamin, who, faced with the horror of Nazi persecution of the Jews, had become a refugee, saw no future, no way out, and ended his life. Amongst his most treasured possessions that he entrusted to the care of his closest friends was this drawing that he'd acquired after the Second World War. Paul Klee had made this drawing in 1920. So I want to compare these two and set them side by side. And this is what Walter Benjamin wrote about his treasured picture by Paul Klee. This is how one pictures the angel of history. His face is turned towards the past. Where we perceive a chain of events, he sees a single catastrophe, which keeps piling wreckage upon wreckage and hurls it in front of his feet. This angel would like to stay, awaken the dead, make visible what has been smashed, but a storm is blowing from paradise. It has got caught in his wings with such violence that the angel can no longer close them. The storm irresistibly propels him into the future, to which his back is turned, while the pile of debris before him grows skyward. The storm is what we call progress. Okay, very complicated. It's about looking into the past when the storm of the future has already threatened, to break your wings. But it's caught you up in its storm, and you can't do anything. You're looking at the past. You can't create a future. Very dark, I'm sorry. There's quite a bit of darkness in my creativity talk. So what do we mean by the storm is brewing, the storm is progress, the fracture of the wings? And this, I want to talk about this theme of crisis. And crisis, of course, isn't always only bad. It's an opportunity to reevaluate what is good and bad, what is past and future, what is possible and impossible. It's the point in a health situation when the patient could either recover or decline. So it's the turning point that unveils or uncovers the moral or normative or ethical foundations of our situation. So that's, we think crisis is just something terrible, but in that terribleness, the possibility of a different future is born, and also the possibility of looking at the mistakes of the past. And the possibility of seeing where our ethics and our research practices dwell. What is the ethos of their practice? So in the Greek term ethos, which is the root word for ethics, ethos is where the horses were stabled. That's where your horses slept at night. That's where you return to. It was your home. It was where your ethics dwells, right? And so it's where the root of morality or the home of morality or the dwelling place of morality and moral character. Because we talked a little bit in different sessions yesterday about how morality was really a rather slippery concept. We all talk as if we all know what it means, but we're not really sure if we might have quite different ideas about it. So in the Greek conception, there were three elements of this ethos. Yeah, phronesis, which is skill, our useful skills and practical wisdom. Arete, which is excellence, yeah, or virtue, as the Greeks saw it. Again, rather fluffy concepts. And also eunoia, which is relational, which is always that our ethics is not just a personal virtue, our arete, but it's also oriented towards our relationships with the world and our audience. The Greeks always thought of things as a sort of performance in front of the democracy. So it wasn't just one of these things, our practical skills, our virtue and excellence, or our relational goodwill. It was a package with all three of these elements, and that is in which our critical reflection on what ethics and ethical conduct, what morality or our foundations of norms are, all three elements. Yeah? And I wanted to reflect on Walter Benjamin's good friend, Theodor Adorno, insofar as one, they're probably quite grumpy friends because he was quite grumpy. I had reason to read his book of aphorisms. So this is how he could deal creatively with a situation that was impossible to write about. Yeah, fleeing from the Second World War, being part of the persecuted minority, having his research center dismantled by the Nazis. He, instead of writing like one long coherent rant, he wrote this little book of aphorisms, little pithy statements and short reflections. And you can always dip into them if you're feeling a bit grumpy, because there's always a relatable rant in there. Yeah? And so the relatable rant is this one. Wrong life cannot be lived rightly. It's a very short aphorism, very pithy. How can we do ethics in an unethical life? How can we practice, yeah, our phronesis, arete, and eunoia in a world that is full of bad phronesis, bad virtues, as it were, but they're not virtues, they're vices, yeah, vicious values, and lack of goodwill towards others, lack of care for others. And this is how we live our lives and do our work in a situation where enjoying our work, enjoying our life requires an infliction of miseries down the entirety of a commodity chain that can only be delusory, that can only be futile, because it relies on the reproducing power relationships that are at the bottom undergirded by violence, by ill will. And how we could easily, habitually be left trying to live a good life in a bad life. And by doing that, a certain cruelty comes into our life, into our living, where we begin to not be able to see or recognize or understand what a good life would be. We cannot imagine it. Yeah, so that Adorno wrote this Minima Moralia as a counterpoint to Aristotle's work, which is sometimes called Magna Moralia, but it was later kind of expanded into the Nicomachean Ethics. Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit about technology and war, because nobody has mentioned war yet. And yet this is the one major global and local instantiation of bad life, of wrong life, that makes right life or good life impossible to even think about. All around the world, but especially in Gaza, in Sudan, in many other conflict zones which have long, persistent conflicts, it's not possible to even think about research or ethical relationships because people's lives have been destroyed at a huge rate. So just want to think back to a particular exhibition in Paris in 1937, the Universal Exposition Universelle of 1937. And at this point, some huge kind of palaces were built to show off the wonderful connection between creativity, artistic achievement, architecture, and at this exhibition, Albert Speer, the Nazi architect, won a prize, the gold medal, for his plan for where the Nuremberg rallies were to be held. Yeah? Very highly commended pavilion, the Nazi pavilion. The Russia also had their similarly totalitarian architecture with, you know, tall, straight columns, you know, the kind of aesthetic, right? Nuremberg rally aesthetic. And at this exhibition, there was one pavilion, only one. Now, this was 1937. And some people, historians, would say the Second World War had not quite broken out yet. Of course, for the people of Guernica, living under Franco's rule, conducting in the midst of the Spanish Civil War, yes, the World War had begun because their whole world had been destroyed already. And so Franco had got the German and the Italian fascists to bomb the town of Guernica, their beautiful, historical, ancient town. This town was mainly inhabited by women and children because the men had gone to the front to fight the war. So the Republican Spanish had sponsored the pavilion, and they displayed Picasso's greatest anti-war work, Guernica, painted to say whatever the artist could say about what had happened to the Basque peoples. Okay, so that's the one painting. The other painting that I want to reflect on was this painting by Fernand Léger, which is housed in the building that's Tokyo, the Palais de Tokyo. Today, it's one of the key exhibits there, or proudly exhibited there. And it's a treasure, it's of modern art. And it's a work by the Cubist painter, French painter, Fernand Léger. And Fernand Léger actually painted a series of paintings called Les Disques, which I think is very similar to André Wies's Broken Wings. And I'll tell you why. Although it doesn't look anything like that. It's colorful, where Wies's drawing is monochromatic. It's circular, where Wies's drawings are angular. But yet there is something about fragmentation, about the circles and the different elements kind of like forming a plane, but the plane is disrupted and it doesn't. I walked past this painting and I went, wait, this is the university. Yeah? All the cogs don't really lead to the other cogs. And, you know, it's all very rational, and there are circles and there are lines and there are, but, you know, the system is basically fragmented and crazy, right? So now, why did Fernand Léger paint this? He painted this in 1918, having just been one of the fortunate survivors of the worst catastrophe of the First World War for the French, the Battle of Verdun. And at this battle, this was when modernity and rationality had basically reached peak insanity, peak inhumanity, yeah? With literally hundreds of thousands of people killed on both sides, making the calculus of war itself a ridiculous prospect. What do we mean by 100,000 French or 100,000 Germans or 300,000 French or 250,000 Germans or 1 million French or 1 million Germans or 9 million Russians? I mean, what do these numbers mean when they reach this level of inhumanity? And he had also been exposed. So at the Battle of Verdun, it was the first time they used these 1,000-ton bombs. Gazillions, I don't know what the numbers were, sort of unbelievable numbers of artillery shells and also chemical weapons. So these were all the products of technological and industrial creativity. Okay, so he painted Les Disques, and you can see he was really interested in colors, in modernity, in cubism, in technology, in science, in semaphore. So semaphore is somewhere in this, yeah? But you can see that whatever the semaphore is indicating, the background and context to this is gross human inhumanity, craziness, and how is an artist to survive this experience? Sorry, now going from tremendous works of art to unbelievable advertising signs of banality. Me walking across our campus, and I see these signs. Be limitless. Be relentless. I didn't have that's enough because I want to put this one. And there's a third one that goes, be ready. Limitless, relentless, ready. Isn't this the story of resilience and creativity that we are being sold? Yeah, as individual sporting competitors. And then another hoarding where they're building a new learning commons, apparently, which is the new word for a library, which may not have any books. Right? What will it have? No, it may not. Look, what will it have? You have smiley people who are very helpful. That's good. We like smiley people who are helpful. But what are they smiling at? Why are they smiling? You can't quite see, but he's smiling because he's pointing to a 3D printer. This is what creativity is going to be. There will be a special learning space, a space for creativity and collaboration. What will the space have? A data visualization room. Yeah, okay, so data is going to just manifest. There'll be a recording studio, very useful, yes, and a maker space. And in this maker space, you can see the three people who are forced to pretend that they are very happy. One of them is pointing at a 3D printer. One of them is smiling at the guy pointing at the 3D printer. And one of them is wearing a VR headset. Well, it's going to be fabulous, isn't it? I'd rather be talking to you. Spaces of creativity and collaboration will be a person wearing a VR headset. I have a problem with this, right? This limitless, relentless readiness. Okay, so now continuing my rant. I have 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so continuing my rant is into this, why we should be suspicious of creativity. You know, at a creative research merchants conference, is this a bit risky? Well, we're in the risk already. Yeah, we're in the risk of being in the creative collaborative spaces as one person wearing a VR headset. and pointing to a 3D printer, right? Which is going to really obviously make our lives very creative, not, and collaborative, not. Why? Because these two books explain it in a way that I could not explain it by my remaining 4 minutes, right? Raunig's polemic, Factories of Knowledge, Industries of Creativity. It's all in the title, but do read the polemic. Yeah, and Ollie Mould's Against Creativity. So what are these forces that are forcing our wings open and threatening to break our wings and not allowing us to face our future, right? Because we are being hurled towards the past. More Adorno. Because in the Capitalocene, thinking about Adorno again in the Capitalocene is a time when all our time is stolen from us by capital, which is bad enough that they're stealing something, but the worst crime is not just the stealing of our time, but it's leaving none left to create our futures that we want. Okay? So it's this march of productivity, of relentless, limitless readiness of creativity that leaves us no time to do things that do not produce for the capitalism. And that foreshortens what we could do collectively because it disallows anything which looks like flourishing to flourishing and even threatens our very survival. And I know you have different instantiations, okay? But there's sort of environmental, ecological, and climate repercussions to this datafied, relentlessly limitless technological thing that is based on data centers that use all our energy and suck all our creativity away from us. So yeah, this idea is actually, what it takes from us is the expectation that we could get something for nothing, that we could balance what we produce with other things that we might want to do, and the habituation of us in our daily lives to the wreckage and debris at our feet, and normalizing it as part of humanity when it's inhumanity. So every day, anybody who cares to look at news could see the rubble of Gaza. But did we really see it? It's all become normalized after nearly 1 year. So ethical creativity, I'm going to finish in 2 minutes, yeah, is pushing back. And pushing back sometimes means seeing the usefulness in uselessness, not being immediately productive, yeah, and a deliberate strategy to refuse this limitless, relentless creativity of the factories of knowledge, the industries of creativity. So Ollie Mould is not really against creativity. He's against industrialized creativity that individualizes people and takes away the possibility that people could creatively make a collective life which would be worth living and recognize that which is life itself. So the possibility then of saying no to wrong life, of recognizing that life that is wrong, to have different inclinations, as the feminist theorist Bonnie Honig says, be inclined in a different way. And she's written a book called The Feminist Theory of Refusal, where the women just go, no, we're not doing it. Yeah, we're going to abandon productive work. We're going to go up into the hills. We're going to cavort around and do whatever we like. Yeah? And maybe having different results. Maybe making different mistakes. Having different possibilities. Maybe I'll just end there. Yeah, I'll end here actually, which is not at all a helpful slide. But I've been thinking with and using, but it's not quite straightforward, the ethical writing of this medical humanities writer, philosopher, Francisco Varela, who talks about ethical know-how. very interestingly, the image that I chose was also in another BUP book that, in fact, a colleague of mine is one of the co-authors. So it's very interesting, Kiribati. So I don't know why it is. This is a meditation on how beings know how to live. And they know how to live in concert. And when they do it, it could be surprising. It could just happen. And it could be really beautiful. And the thing about birds is they do not have a philosophical lesson on how to avoid collision with each other, or a mathematics lesson, or a physics lesson, right? They take flight, and they fly together, but they don't collide. And in avoiding collision, but flying together, they form these transient shapes that awaken in us a visual and emotional recognition that we could be like that too, in some unspoken, untheorized way. And I think this is really what Varela does when he brings in the Zen Buddhist thought into his rather practical and pragmatic thing of putting wisdom, phronesis, yeah, before any arguments about what excellence or virtue or morality look like. And allowing that ethical practice to emerge and come into a flourishing being and doing. And I think that's where I'll finish. Sorry. I was like, oh,
yeah. So thank you so much, Sue. That was absolutely incredible. So we're just getting the chat up to see if there's any online questions. But in the meantime, if anyone has any questions in the room they'd like to kick us off with, then that would be great.
Yeah, I've done a very good job there, I think.
Sorry, do we have a... You just wait for a microphone. Sorry.
Sue, that was absolutely inspirational. It was explosive, and it was what makes you think, and your brain explodes with all sorts of possibilities, and the need for change, the urgency for change across many platforms. Thank you so much. My question is about this. As you know, I think I research multiple creativities, and when anybody says creativity, I ask them, which one are you speaking of? The fact that you speak about ethical creativity, a kind of creativity that I've not seen that word, ethical creativity. So I will be citing you tomorrow in a book that I'm writing and asking you for more, please. But not from Oliver, but from Research Methods, Creativities, Thinking. My question is, what do you see, and how might you advise us as creative research methods communities to think differently and do differently to manifest ethical creativity in our research, in our writing? Thank you.
Do I one at a time? Yeah.
Yeah, do that.
Okay.
Do an online.
So I think at the end of the day, ethical creativity depends on ethics. And ethics, as I try to begin to think about in the talk, has to live somewhere. So I think thinking about where your creativity and your ethics live, and how is this creative act, is this creative doings, are these leading to the flourishing of the creativity of beings, right? So is it enabling beings, human beings and non-human beings, to live and to live well and to flourish? Because we, as living beings, know what it is to be alive. Beyond that, I think it is to refuse death dealing. And because you can't be creative if you're not alive. And we are not talking about that. We're not stopping any of that death dealing from happening. So part of our creativity has to go not only in looking to the past, yeah, but refusing that force that's throwing us back to a way of doing things where we were not recognizing what are these tumultuous, destructive forces. To think, how are we going to make our world survivable and livable with this much harm and grief? So to me, thinking about ethos, giving us time to dwell, not rushing to do your fancy methods in a methodology before you have given room in your methodology to think. Give yourself the luxury of thinking, of critical reflection, and be really fierce and strict with yourself about not being thoughtless, not just doing something because it'll be easy to do, because that's the industry of creativity. That's the factory of knowledge. Refusing the factory time.
Thanks. So I think we'll have an online question now, if that's all right. So Beth asks, I wonder if you have any thoughts on how we can collectively be non-relentless and useless to try and provoke other forms of knowing, doing, being in an academic context.
2 suggestions. So the first I tried was cursing. Because sometimes our life feels very cursed. It's almost like an occult thing has happened to us, where what is this life like? Why is it so awful? Why are we saying dreadful things, doing dreadful things, being dreadful people, and making our life dreadful and living in a dreadful way? And sometimes you just have to utter expletives. Why? Because cursing expels the air and invites you to breathe in. Right? So cursing is one. And laughing. Laughing is very, very important because, again, it's the salubrious intake of air after you have expelled all the bad humors. So I think they're my 2 useless suggestions for being useless: cursing and laughing.
Brilliant, love it. So we have got one more online question I'll go for just because I can see it. So Mel asks, I was just mulling on your comment on flourishing. How can we conceptualize and witness flourishing? What does it look like? I say this as permission to angering and grief as a stepping stone to flourishing, but as researchers, we might not see beyond the stepping stone.
Wow, what an amazing question. Let me just think about that for a bit. There's quite a few different parts to that question.
Yeah, I would just take maybe the thing about...
Try to put them together. Yeah, I will. Conceptualizing and witnessing flourishing requires a vocabulary and an imagination of flourishing. So it begins by noticing flourishing, giving yourself permission to notice that which is flourishing. Praise it. Yeah. Praise the creative clothes that are in this conference. Praise the wonderful appearance of your colleagues' faces. Praise the great song the bird is doing, like just by being alive. So witnessing can take many different forms, and it's just about noticing, I think, and giving time. And this is one of the great artistic virtues that art can bring to creative research practice, is to give us different tools and ways to record what we've noticed and to mull on and dwell in the flourishing that we've noticed, the weed in the crack in the pavement, yeah, the little tiny detail, the funny joke that happened because some letter fell off a sign, you know, anything really that will make you notice and can do that. Boringly in theory, I mean, I'm a human development and capabilities theorist, so I could bore you endlessly with capabilities theory, but I'm sure that was not the objective of the question. And how might we have permission to angering and grief as a stepping stone to flourishing, I suppose, is simply by including and recognizing, noticing, including and recognizing, and having a space for affect and emotion, which is not only anger and grief, but also in noticing the flourishing joy and love.
Thank you. So we have got time for another question if we've got any in the room. There's some pointing. Oh yeah, sorry, there's hand up over there. So if we could have one from the room.
Hi, that was a brilliant talk. Thank you. You mentioned care throughout the talk, and I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more. So like caring for, caring about, an ethic of care, how does that fit into your vision that you sort of just...
Well, I suppose my vision, it was not really a well-articulated vision, nor was it a manifesto for care and how care could be organized. There are fabulous scholars who have written dense and deeply thoughtful books about this in a way that I could not treat. I can think of Joan Tronto's work, of course, and Maria Puig de la Bella have done fantastic. The last Catalan author, whose name I probably mangled, the title of the book is Matters of Care. But first and foremost, my talk today was mainly a rant. So I think noticing and ranting against carelessness, against research and academia as careless ethos, and trying to imagine, seeing beyond that storm that is pushing our wings and breaking them in the wrong direction towards something else. So I can't talk about the possibilities of making different mistakes, but I haven't developed any manifesto for doing it rightly, because I think that's up to us based on our practical knowledge, upon our appreciation of virtues and what we wish to excel in. And then I think we can rightly, relationally do that eunoia piece of relating to each other well. But indeed, in all matters of care, it's quite simple, really. I think it's the difference between good relationships and bad relationships. And it's up to us, of course, we have to develop a moral compass. I don't think it's the job of a keynote speaker to provide you with one or to write it down.
For what it's worth, I think you would write an amazing manifesto. So I think, definitely worth considering. I think we could possibly squeeze in one. Oh no, Sue's, sorry, Helen's nodding to say done. If there is one more question, we can do one more. But if not, we probably ought to move on. Okay, then let's move on. Okay. So final, just say thank you for Sue. That was absolutely amazing keynote. Thank you so much.